Sage is undeniably being slammed into the ground right now on social media and raiding circles, and when you pull up the objective factual data of Savage raid clears, it actually puts into perspective that Scholar literally has 4 times the number of clears as Sage. That's not an exaggeration, and that's a huge gap. For instance, you don't see this incredible gap between Astro and White Mage. So now case closed, show's over, Sage is bad. Why did the developers even add a brand new healer instead of adding 2 DPS this expansion, aside from my lasting pain over the loss of Nocturnal Astrologian? Hold the phone for a minute. I'm actually going to snap that train of thought in half by saying that I have actively chosen myself to prog on Sage over Scholar this tier, and I make no apologies for it, as I'm about to say in this video. So Cole's lost it. Between the death of his grandmother, the job changes, and I mean the real life job changes, and other massive life events, he's absolutely snapped. He's gone over the damn edge. I can already visualize it now. But that's not the full truth, and while Scholar, I can rant and rave for literally hours. Don't tempt me. I actually wrote like a 100-page document on my website, like FFXIV, that's been out there for like over a year and a half or something crazy, that like way before Endwalker, that like it's amazing. But the point I'm trying to make in this video is Sage is definitely not bad. I'm going to simplify this way more than I want to for the sake of time of this video. Scholar has one key element that makes it brutally valuable in progression rating, especially when people are learning mechanics. Expedient. You know, Expedient. The move that makes you move fast for 10 seconds that people mocked and dunked on, that I told everyone was actually great, and then I got dumped on for months preceding, until, not to my surprise, Expedient is fantastic. Now there are a ton of differences between Sage and Scholar, better suited for another video that would probably be 3 hours in length, but I do want to highlight and focus specifically on what Sage is bringing here and why I made this choice. Oh, look at the shitter choosing Sage. So first up is actually one fault, one detriment of Expedient. Its movement speed boost is so good that its mitigation potential, which is also very, very strong, is often thrown into the dumpster and absolutely wasted. Where on Sage, when I use Holos, no one says, wow, you actually use that for raw mitigation, you're terrible, and I question your skill as a healer. But I also, it's mind-blowingly powerful. Instantaneous shielding and a little bit of a heal underneath it, which basically flips off with the middle finger to burst damage, and it has no cast time, it's off the GCD, so you're getting that powerful heal, that a little bit of a heal. It's not amazing, but you also get that big barrier on top of it, and then you also get that mitigation. That is a very, very strong button. I have personally used this already this patch, which is the first time that they added the shield onto it, which is so good. I cannot emphasize it enough. It has been basically just putting up a wall instantly on fights like PF and Barbarecia Extreme. Say I'm with a co-healer that isn't like how to say it nicely, that isn't really familiar with the ground pound fist move that uses a ton of abilities, and they're not using something like Lilybell, and they're just like, hee, I'm a white mage, I'm casting Glare, which we've all experienced in PF at some point or another, my healer friends. But I save Holos for the other time when I'm not using Panhaima just because of that, and there have been times where the other healer literally didn't heal, and I could basically carry us through that. Like, Holos is so good. But I've also used it to further cushion out the tank busters in P5S. Holos, especially with the added barrier now, is just undeniably powerful. Now the second thing I adore that I'm going to get into my last point about here, because I actually have all my points here, is I adore having mobility on a healer. And having a mobility ability on the healer is something that I absolutely love. And yes, one can very much argue that you do not need mobility abilities on a healer. All content is meant to obviously have healers clear without having this mobility ability, otherwise it would be broken content. And oftentimes I choose not to use Icarus, but to me it is like having air conditioning in a car. Sure, I can technically be fine without the AC, but I like having it there, and it's just really good when I need it. Third up is Massive, and by massive I actually mean a very big game-changing decision between Scholar and Sage. Panhaima can be argued to be the exact same as Scholar's Constellation ability that they can use when they pop Seraph. Obviously there's some general changes between them, but largely you could argue that. But the problem is Seraph is a single cooldown on a 2-minute timer, and Seraph is tied to Seraphic Veil, where the Seraph is throwing out Seraphic Veil on single targets, which Seraphic Veil is an ability that can be argued to be equivalent to Sage's completely separate independent cooldown ability, Haima, without the pan, just the Haima. But Panhaima and Panhaima can be leveraged at different times, is what I'm getting at here, and that is extremely powerful. In fact, in dungeons runs, I explicitly intentionally use the area of effect Panhaima ability to mitigate the single target tank being hit by all those mobs in the dungeon pulls, because that barrier set is so powerful even in a single target scenario.
What do you mean you used an AoE ability to mitigate a single target?
See, for me, I will always value the ability to pick and choose, and Sage provides me with those options. Even if numerically it may be similar, when you get into the ability to use different things at key opportune moments, it's kind of like what people say, right time, right place. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. Fourth up is I am a control freak and I love Kardia. I have said this as soon as we found out what Kardia does with the Sage. I like to pick and choose who to heal and when I heal them. Too often through the past like 10 years, I have seen my fairy heal off chip damage on DPS when the tank is being wailed on. Oh my god. I'm so over it, and I wasn't joking when I said that before. I am so over that, but especially this tier, especially in dungeons, and so basically between raiding and dungeons, like everywhere, 90% of the time I want Kardia on the tank being slammed into oblivion or dying to that massive damage over time, plus Proto-Carby as on top of the damage over time, wailing on them with autos. I might want that on the tank. Now a little bit of a pivot here. On the note of extreme single target damage, the tanks are definitely taking this raid tier. Hello, Haima. I know that I'm going to a previous point there, but Jesus has truly blessed us with the insane power of these skills. Now, if you pop Seraph just for tank autos and bleeds, people would likely call you sus, and that's probably the nicer version of them calling you an absolute. Another perk is Soteria is fantastic. Yes, it's the equivalent so-called of Fey Union, but it's so much more convenient. First up, you get it immediately, you don't need to build the gauge up. Second of all, you die in prog, you don't lose the gauge. Third of all is kind of a feely feel kind of comment, but it feels snappier, quicker to use, more fire and forget than Fey Union. While Fey Union's range was increased, which was a game changer, I've used it extensively myself on Scholar because I play Scholar still, but like it doesn't feel as snappy. Playing both, it doesn't feel as do it now. Now let's talk about Krasis, because that ties into this, which is a 20% all healing amplification. And for any healer or anyone who's newer to healing, maybe you don't know this, like healing magic is on GCD, whereas like healing, like generic healing, is going to be like everything, including your off GCDs and your GCDs. And Krasis buffs both your on GCDs and your off GCDs as well as everyone else's. It's very powerful. That impacts your Haima. Which is great. This impacts the White Mage's regen ability. This impacts your Kardia. The Krasis 20% healing boost is exceptional. I could keep going with examples, but Soteria and Krasis, what I'm trying to get at here, attack together, which allows me to recover deep damage very easily in a DPS lossless fashion. Now another huge perk of Sage in this tier in dungeons and raid is going to be Tarkul, is a 10% damage mitigation that Scholar completely doesn't have. Scholar instead has a timed heal for a massive burst after the target takes X amount of damage. Okay. Great use cases for that, undeniably. When the target goes below that threshold, that's a great burst. Amazing for dungeons, I love it. Use it with recitation in dungeons. I basically get to turn my brain off for like a minute. But 10% mitigation is very powerful. Very, very, very powerful, because you use it in conjunction with the tank using tank cooldowns or whatever else you want to use, like Haima. Nothing says more value than buffing Haima with Krasis and then making it so that that padded stack of barriers is also going to be protected with that mitigation on top of it. That is extremely good. Now, that's not even getting into the fact that you can bathe the tanks with mitigation the majority of time, with Caracol into Tarkul into another Caracol, which I'm gonna now bundle all of those last few points together. Especially on Sage, there's absolutely zero excuse why any damage should be coming in raw. More than any other healer, you have the most tools for persistent, consistent mitigation. Separate Haima Panhaima with Holos has another barrier. You have mitigation through Caracol. You have Tarkul Caracol staggering. There's just zero excuse on Sage as why it's coming in raw. Absolutely none. Now my next point is Scholar has the skill Fey Blessing, which frankly is in its state, and in my mind and in many other scholars that I talk to's mind, actually I haven't heard one say it differently yet. It's basically like an AoE chip damage heal. Fey Blessing for the Scholar. Helpful, but not staggering. Now Sage took 2 charges of Fey Blessing, said screw this, doubled the potency, and doubled the cooldown. So basically took 2 of them, slammed them together, and now made it an undeniable burst of AoE healing. That's Pneuma, and almost any day of the week I will choose a more powerful heal with a kick, that nice boom, over a slow drizzle. It's going to be more powerful to plan around and more impactful in emergency situations. Also, Pneuma can be paired with Zoe to make it an absolutely radiant 900 potency heal. Now let's talk Zoe, because arguably this is Sage's equivalent to Scholar's Recitation. To be clear, Scholar is not weaker in this department, but I find Sage's far more to my taste and usability. So Zoe, same cooldown as Recitation, 90 seconds. What Zoe however has is a massive 30 seconds duration. 30, that you heard that right. You can hold onto that effect for 30 seconds and then use it significantly ahead into the future. That alone makes it far easier to sneakily use Zoe and get out more casts of Zoe, because you have the cooldown running as you're just holding onto that Zoe, being like, hee, I'm gonna use this in 25 seconds, whoa. Basically, that's where my brain goes. But Recitation should also be used early. I don't want to slander Scholars, especially as one who's played Scholar for a decade. You should be precasting that too, but it's at half the duration of 15 seconds, and so we're talking significantly less leniency here. But now onto Zoe's effects. Zoe on its own has 2 big uses in my mind. Harder hitting content, pair Zoe with Eucration Prognosis for a big massive AoE barrier. Or alternatively, for damage you know you will survive, pair it with Pneuma for a huge recovery pivot for the entire party. 100 potency, no damage lost, free, beautiful. But Cole, that is disingenuous, because Scholars can produce a bigger barrier with guaranteed crit ad low spread. You're 100% correct. You thought I was going to deny that? Oh, you're 100% correct. But the difference is for Sage that the Sage has a significantly larger variation in the number of barriers that they can bait the team in. Is it Panhaima alone? Is it Eucration Prognosis alone? Is it going to be Zoe Eucration Prognosis? Zoe Prognosis with Holos, Holos alone, Holos with Panhaima, and no on GCD cast, Holos alone with Zoe, and Pneuma for recovery. Maybe you have a 30-second cadence of AoEs that might wipe the group, or every minute. That's going to be a lot of different options. And like the Holos alone with the Zoe for Pneuma with recovery is going to be a lossless combo right there. No damage lost using that. Also recall you have that 30-second duration on Zoe, allowing you to sneak more of that in. What this is translating to is that Sage has a significantly larger array of tools to produce barriers of different sizes, where Scholars largely, of course exceptions exist, but largely locked to a few strict patterns. Even Dissipation, which I will argue in a Sage positivity video is stunningly powerful when used right, but even Dissipation is locked at a 3-minute cooldown with drawbacks like you lose the fairy and lose access to those skills, which is not a problem for an experienced Scholar, but it is for sure a pitfall, especially for a newer one during prog, and I don't need to worry about that on Sage. Now this lands me onto my second last point. Simply put, Sage has Phlegma that feels great to use. I don't care, yeah, healer rotations aren't the best, so I gotta take what I can get, guys. I know I've scraped the bottom of the barrel here, but I truly find it more fun than chain stratagem. Phlegma allows me to use it for mobility when I'd want to use wider movements in a lossless form. Ruin 2 isn't the biggest damage loss for Scholar, I've already gone over it in past videos, but I'd rather not lose my damage if I don't need to. I'd also get to pretend that I'm actually doing something in a burst window. I'm holding charges of Phlegma for the raid buff window, how exciting. Like I said, I take what I can get. Now my last point is an actual great feature of the Sage, and not enough people really consider it. How many actual casts does the Sage actually use? How many hard cast abilities in place does it need to use? Not talking about Diagnosis or Prognosis, because why on earth are you casting those? The answer is you are on Sage able to be completely fully mobile for every single cast outside of Dosis and 1 Pneuma every 2 minutes. Obviously Dosis is going to make the majority of your casts, but Phlegma and Toxicon make up for those times too. Say I'm on Scholar deploying my big barrier, that needs to be cast with me in place, and in emergency situations, Sage mobility feels fantastic. I'm not even talking about Icarus. Icarus was an earlier point, but I've done so much PF and Barbarisha now that I can tell you, is it ideal to spam barriers? Obviously not. I'm not here to do that because that'd be dumb. But when the going gets tough, what I will say is you are there to hoist the team up. You went in as a healer, and you want to make the party clear whether they are kicking and screaming and kicking you in the face like a baby and seemingly doing PvP with you. Your job is to get them through, and being able to chase after running tanks or dodge AoEs while spamming Eucration Prognosis, popping Pepsis, then another Eucration Prognosis praying, that's powerful and a big perk, and much harder to do in Barbarisha and Scholar. Lord, the PF I've been in, sometimes it's like, God help. So yeah, Sage is far from bad right now, and I feel like the messaging is all warped and construed by data and first world clears. Sage is no pushover. Does it have movement speed buffs with Expedient? No, it doesn't. But I'm putting my own money where my mouth is, and I'm using Sage because, honest to goodness, it has some exceptionally powerful features as we've gone on for 15 minutes now. I just looked at the timer and I'm like, shit. Well, that does it for this video. Whew, what a doozy. I apologize, guys. I want to make it like 10 minutes, but I feel like Sage, that I love and main alongside my 10-year main Scholar, which I also love, it just deserved a thorough video, and if you guys would like it, it would make me incredibly happy if you would consider dropping a set of new lists on that like button and cat daddy that subscribe button. Take care everyone, and I truly hope that you have a wonderful day.